everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie and I'll be your astrologer today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of an extra sneak peek at this up and coming Jupiter in Gemini square Saturn in Pisces. If you guys like my content and you'd like to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below. This will subscribe you to my channel and alert you as to when we have new videos coming out. We're here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday trying to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. All right, so full disclosure, we're early for this, but I really wanted to take some time to talk to you guys about one of the bigger transits taking place in the month of August. We are going to be feeling that, especially today. That's why I wanted to do it today, because the moon's in Gemini right now. So we've got a number of planets that are in Gemini that are starting to kind of feel the incoming friction to Saturn in Pisces. So this actual transit will not be taking place until closer to August 19th, 2024. However, we look at Jupiter right now around 14 degrees of Gemini, so it's within about a 4-degree range of a square to Saturn. So this is probably a good idea to kind of just take the information, kind of marinate on this a little bit so you're kind of prepared for some of the events that may come with this square. And we are going to see it several times. So that's something else to kind of think about. Actually, later in the year, we are going to see Jupiter, after its retrograde, coming into a square with Saturn again around December 24th, 2024. And then eventually there will be another one next year, but it's going to be in different signs. That'll be both when Saturn has ingressed into the sign of Aries and Jupiter moves into Cancer. So we're going to see it take place several times. I really want to focus more on the mutable square today. And this is going to be affecting those of you guys who are around 17 degrees of the mutable signs. So obviously my Geminis, my Virgos, my Sagittariuses, as well as my Pisces risings, you guys are really going to feel this. And those of you guys who are ruled by Jupiter. So if you happen to be a Sag or a Pisces rising, you're going to be kind of feeling the expansion and the contraction. And those of you guys who are ruled by Saturn, like my Capricorns, Aquariuses, and Pisces risings, you guys are going to be feeling the crunch a little bit too. All right, so first things first, like I said, we're kind of coming into range. Some of you guys may not really feel the effects of this until closer to mid-August, but still it's a really notable transit. And there's a lot of reasons why. I want to start by talking to you guys first about the Sabian symbols and also the degree astrology relating to this. So obviously when we see the square, let's move to the 19th of August. When you guys see the square, it's going to be taking place at 17 degrees. Okay, so you may want to take a special note, especially if you have any planets at 17 degrees, that's going to be activating those planets in your chart. Even if it's not mutable, it will be making an aspect to that one way or another. But 17 degrees correlates and connects to the sign of Leo. So this is going to be about romantic endeavors, creative endeavors, relationships that we have to our romantic partners, our children, our joy, as well as self-expression. Leo also has connection to entertainment, things like casinos or cinemas, theaters, plays, performances, bars, any place where we're going to kind of come together and interact and have a good time. So likely it may correlate or relate to some of these topics if we apply that degree theory. Now, when we see the square taking place, we're going to be seeing it at 17 and 17. So I want to read to you guys the Sabian symbols. As you guys know, we round up. So I'm going to be reading you guys 18 degrees of each sign. And the first one we're going to take a look at is going to be in Gemini. So let's read Gemini 18. Just give us a little bit more context. So Gemini 18 is two Chinese men talking Chinese. The keyword is difference. The theme is specialization. The symbol speaks to the distinctiveness or type of uniqueness that separates an individual from the rest of his fellows in terms of intelligence, education, or interests. It also speaks to the strength and comfort that can be found in affiliating with other like-minded individuals. The image of two Chinese men talking Chinese suggests an exclusivity or type of the type that is often misunderstood or viewed with suspicion. However, the emphasis here is on specialization and refinement of skills that serves to protect the individual from scattering himself too thinly. On a practical level, this degree refers to the scholar, the scientist, and other specialists. At its highest, the symbol represents highly developed expertise in some unusual areas. Watch for lack of success in life due to an unfortunate tendency to repeatedly get involved in activities and relationships that are totally unsuited to self's potential. The accent is on specialization and exclusiveness. You may find it necessary to find an expert to help you with a project. Your greatest advantage lies in appreciating and refining your own uniqueness. Find others who share your interests and be true to yourself. Guard against trying to be something that you're not. Don't try to force yourself into a groove that doesn't fit. Stepping stones are uniqueness, difference, specialization, exclusiveness, distinctiveness, communication, and conversation. When I think about this, what comes up for me is the importance of understanding communication as well as a diverse, unfamiliar environment, in an unfamiliar environment. So it may suggest the need to bridge cultural and language barriers to share knowledge and ideas effectively. Now, when we look at the 18 degrees for Pisces, this is a gigantic tent and the theme is revival. The symbol speaks to a gaining of holistic understanding through life and a dramatic intensification experience. The image of a gigantic tent to integration is the process of pulling various pieces together into a unified and organized whole. In the 1931 version of the symbol, they referred to a revivalist tent, a revision of ideas back to source, or a renewal of faith. In the 1953 version, the image was described as a circus tent. The focus there was on excitement and sharing of skills and risks that brings an individual to renewed insight to his capacity for putting his world in order as well as immediate entertainment. It was viewed from a modern perspective that this commentary appropriately described the effects of an emotional high that results in a quickening of spirit or a sudden rebirth of self-confidence and self-esteem. On a practical level, this symbol can refer to a gathering where participants are inspired to and stirred into action through an appeal of their emotions. At its highest, the symbol represents a special talent for getting things done by motivating or stimulating others to rally some cause at hand. Watch for psychic manipulations, grandstanding, rebel-rousing, or instigation. The accent is on getting it all together. You could be involved in some community affair that requires you to juggle your priorities. Your greatest advantage lies in getting organized, putting things first, and the rest will fall into place. Grouping things will help. Guard against getting carried away with a false sense of self-importance and avoid being too loud or monopolizing on conversation. Give others a chance to express themselves and be willing to share the stage. Stepping stones are an intensification, excitement, self-renewal, quickening, motivation, inspiration, entertainment, completeness, unification, and shelter. Okay? So obviously the Sabian symbols are meant to kind of give us a little bit of insight as to how to better interpret this, but sometimes they can be literal, you know? So something to kind of think about is that, when this square happens, it's going to be an opening square. And squares are 90-degree angles, which means there's some kind of friction and we're trying to get two planets to kind of work together and meet in the middle. Thankfully, they're mutable signs. So that means that as long as they're willing to be flexible or they're willing to make change or complete or end something, then something new can begin. So when I think about the Saturn-Jupiter square, this is the first Saturn-Jupiter square like this in the opening square that we've actually seen in roughly 20 years. The last one that we had was back in 2005. And that took place between Jupiter in Scorpio and Saturn in Leo. This was after the 2000 kind of .com era. The internet was getting big, and obviously when we see squares between Scorpio and Leo, these are very financial signs, so we know what kind of happened after and around the time of the .com bust. But I think that this is also interesting because it came after the conjunction that happened in Taurus. So when we think about Jupiter coming into conjunction with Taurus, it was going to be about some really big physical or financial shifts. So that square that took place was the impact that it had ultimately, I think, on the markets because the square happened between Scorpio and Leo. Anyway, we think also about entertainment that happened in the 2000s. There was a lot of money in entertainment and concerts and boy bands and like all of that stuff. And I think that kind of connects and correlates to it too. But the opening square that this one is taking place is actually stemming from the conjunction that we had back in 2020 in the sign of Capricorn. So I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So just to give you some reference, whatever friction is kind of building with this particular square, it's actually connected to something that was seeded several years ago. So let's go back to 2020. I don't remember exactly when it is, but we can find it. And it looks like Jupiter was kind of hovering around Saturn for a little while here. So there was also a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that happened in Aquarius, by the way. And that happened at the end of 2020. But I'm referencing specifically the one that happened first, which was in Capricorn. Okay, so we saw the one that happened at the end of 2020. Let's look. This is really going to come down to the wire. I believe it was Aquarius. Okay, so they were conjunct at 29 degrees of Capricorn. It was not exact. See this? Right around here? Okay, so around 13th, 14th. And then they came into conjunction at 29 degrees around mid-December, and then both of them were conjunct. I believe it was like right around the solstice in December. Sorry guys, Mercury retrograde shadows totally getting me today. So the conjunction was in Aquarius. Okay, so that seeded moment. Obviously, it's still building off of what was happening in 2020. We think about what was going on with world powers. We think about what was going on with big business. Conjunctions obviously are seen as one of the strongest aspects in astrology. This is when you kind of merge the archetype of two planets together. So whether it was happening in Capricorn and Aquarius, Aquarius is more an air element. It definitely was kind of kicking off the beginning of what was going to be a new reality for technology, for politics, for the internet, for socialization. We were still kind of dealing on and off also with lockdowns and things pertaining to the COVID pandemic. So when we see the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, you just want to kind of think about what has been brewing, what has been happening since the second portion of 2020 for you. Look at both Capricorn and Aquarius because that's kind of the area that's being primarily highlighted. What was seeded at that time? What were you working on? Now, specifically look more at Aquarius because this is the house where the conjunction was taking place. So you seeded something there. Okay, now we can fast forward to what's coming August of this year. So now we have got in August, there we go, on the 19th, you're going to see the Jupiter-Saturn square, okay? So the one thing I want you guys to know is that you don't have to wait until the 19th to feel this, all right? You guys do not have to wait to the 19th to feel this. I think that because it's within a couple degrees range, it's already starting to build up. There's going to be like an extra little bit of flavor that's going to be here as well because Mars is going to be very close to Jupiter. So it's not your stereotypical Jupiter Saturn square. There is going to be a little bit more of an oomph behind it. It's going to pack a bigger punch. So when we think about what these two planets represent, right? So Jupiter and Saturn, in my opinion, could not be any more different. We've got Jupiter, which represents expansion, growth, and abundance, just kind of generally. This is a planet that's associated with optimism as well as good fortune, and it's also about the search for the meaning of life purpose, right? That's why it has associations with Sagittarius. Jupiter is known for being wise, and it presides over topics like philosophy and higher learning, college education, publications. It's known for teachers and gurus and leaders in a sense of philosophical or spiritual or educational things. Jupiter encourages us to expand our horizons. And this is about exploring new ideas or pursuing new dreams, learning about different cultures, traveling to different places. So Jupiter being in the sign of Gemini is going to be magnifying Gemini themes, right? So we'll get into what that means in a second. Now, Saturn, on the other hand, is the polar opposite, right? That's why when you look at a Sagittarius and a Capricorn, you see this kind of the stark difference between the personality profiles. Saturn is known as a planet that is about hard work, dedication, right? It's about structure, it's about discipline and responsibility. Saturn is known for boundaries and borders, whether that's walls or setbacks, limitations, timelines. And this is also the challenges that Saturn kind of presents to us as our teacher. So he teaches us to confront our fears and our insecurities. Anybody who's very Saturnian knows what that's like. Anybody who's gone through their Saturn return, they know that that was a period of possible upheaval, but big reward on the other side. Now, Saturn's also the planet of karma. This is about maturity and the lessons that we must learn in order to grow and evolve. So it teaches us the importance of hard work, perseverance, and self-discipline, where, Saturn wants us to show up and be on time and kind of punch the time clock and stay committed and stay the path. Jupiter says, I know no bounds. I want to party, I want to travel, I want to gamble. I'm optimistic about what the future holds, while Saturn is a little bit more reserved. So we definitely have a bit of like a clash of the gods that are going on with this particular square that's happening between the two planets. This clash between Jupiter and Saturn arises from their contrasting energies. While Jupiter's expansive nature leads to overindulgence, excess, and lack of boundaries, and Saturn's restrictive nature can sometimes lead to being fearful, pessimistic, and feeling the limitations. So Jupiter wants to grow and explore, and Saturn wants us to stay grounded and focus on our responsibilities. It's going to kind of sound like we're kind of between a rock and a hard place here. Do we lean more into responsibility? Do we kind of cut loose a little bit and give ourselves some slack? Personally, I feel like if you're feeling torn between two areas, the key is moderation. There is no answer to kind of solving this. I think that, we may feel torn between our desire for freedom and also our need for structure and stability. This tension can manifest as a struggle between our dreams and our obligations, or as a conflict between our optimism and our fear. So by finding a balance between these two, we can harness the strengths and overcome their challenges, and I think it's going to lead to a much more fulfilling and meaningful life. Now, this is a big deal because, like I said, we haven't had this for nearly 20 years. So this is a new cycle that is emerging. The opening square is kind of the first hurdle, the first challenge that we're going to be encountering since the things that have been taking place since that seeding in December of 2020. Now, what about the specific meaning of the square between Gemini, which is mutable air, ruled by Mercury, the mind, communication, early education, driving, documents, media, and Pisces, which is mutable water. So this is dealing with emotions and mysticism and hidden places, things like hospitals, prisons, but also churches, spirituality, religion, things kind of connecting to the ethers, and also us as a whole. This can also be about the collective. So when we see this square, there is this tension between the two energies, and it can impact us very much personally, as well as it's going to be impacting us globally. For the kind of personal effects, I would say this is about, like I said, kind of finding the balance between your need for freedom, learning, and exploration, Jupiter and Gemini, with the need for structure, responsibility, and commitment, Saturn and Pisces. For example, someone might feel torn between pursuing a new educational opportunity or career path, Jupiter and Gemini, and the obligations and limitations of their current job or family responsibility, Saturn and Pisces, right? I think out in the world, when we kind of zoom out, I think it's going to bring about challenges relating to communication and access to information and technology, because Jupiter and Gemini can be highlighting that, and the clash with issues of boundaries, limitations, and responsibility, Saturn and Pisces. I think, for instance, we're going to see lots of debates over censorship. I know that you guys might think this is like over and long gone. It's not. It's coming back. This is also going to be really touching on laws, because Jupiter represents laws. Saturn is rules, which we follow, but Jupiter actually makes the laws. Revolving around freedom of speech and also the spread of misinformation on social media platforms. I do believe that it's going to intensify at this time. Pisces, which is kind of connected to Neptune in a modern sense, can also be about simulations, distortions, manipulations, green screens, AI, things that are kind of, manipulated in a way that can also look real. So we're going to be kind of hearing about, well, does there need to be rules revolving around things that are being posted? You're going to see more people kind of discussing where they're taking images and they're running it through software, trying to see if it's legitimate or if it's potentially or most likely kind of AI generated and kind of fake. Just to give you guys some examples, like think back to what happened when there was all that speculation about Kate Middleton, and she put that video out when she was talking about going through her cancer diagnosis and her cancer treatment. I'm not here to talk about whether it was real or not. But if you guys remember, there was a lot of stuff on the internet where people took that video and they were like, she's wearing the same shirt she was wearing 7 years ago, and like her family's not with her. And in one shot, she's wearing a ring, another shot, she's not. And everybody was making all of these like assumptions and saying that it was generated. And then you saw people running it through software, and we're trying to kind of validate their stance that this has been kind of artificially created. Whether that's true or not, that's very much kind of like the Jupiter and Gemini, what kind of comes out on the internet or on social media, and how it's debated and talked about whether or not it's real, right? So these are the things you're going to see. Just this week, we saw Gavin Nome come out, and he was talking about how upset he was about somebody taking AI of Vice President Kamala Harris's voice. And somebody created a campaign video that had her in it, and it sounded just like her. It even like kind of looked like her, but it was not her. It was not her speaking, and it was a campaign video where they were making fun of her. And Gavin Nome was really upset about it and was talking about laws and regulations revolving around like AI voices, right? Interesting. So you're going to see that kind of stuff that's going to be coming up. The irony is that, you know, Saturn can be about, you know, leaders or people who are in higher positions of office, kind of, you know, speaking out against what is being shared or what is, you know, being kind of spread, you know, on social media. Anyway, the significance of an opening square, especially a mutable square, I think lies in the fact that this is the first of 3 squares that we will see as they kind of move throughout the zodiac. So this first square, like I said, is seen as a test or a challenge. It's setting the stage for future squares and an eventual resolution and integration of these energies involved. In this case, the mutable square between Jupiter and Saturn, I think, is encouraging individuals and society to adapt, learn, and find innovative solutions for challenges that they face, just point blank. Now, like I said, you're going to see this square again in December. Right now, Saturn is retrograde. So some would say that Saturn does not have as much power in the first square, okay? Which I'm kind of neutral on. I think we do need to have some sense of boundaries and, you know, like be kind of grounded. We can't just kind of run aimlessly with stuff, which is what I think people may do while this transit is happening. And that's more connected to the fact that Mars is going to be in conjunction. So I'll talk about that in a second. But Saturn is retrograde. So Saturn has less power. It has less motivation. It's going to have less clarity as well. We think of Saturn as being structures. So I definitely feel like when it comes to Gemini related things like media, right? Journalists, people who are publishing things, whether it's blogs or maybe you have a YouTube channel. I think this is going to be a big time for independent journalism because, well, Mars is involved. So it's going to be about people who are kind of fiercely leading the way, and they're kind of like the tip of the spear for breaking news and information that's kind of coming out, that's kind of challenging what Saturn has been saying or the status quo or, you know, some sense of like leadership. So this will happen again in December of 2024, but right now Saturn is retrograde. Now down the road, we're going to see a bit of a flip-flop, okay? And like, surprise, it's going to happen. If you celebrate Christmas, it's going to be happening on Christmas Eve. So I assume this might be some people who might be a little disappointed around Christmas time. So we're going to see this square that's going to be happening, it looks like right around 13, almost 14 degrees. Okay, so let's see. There we go. Yeah, so it's going to happen like right around there. So Christmas Eve, 2024. Now this time around, Jupiter's retrograde, okay? So Saturn's kind of in the driver's seat. I think Saturn does, in theory, because this is an opening square and Saturn is in a more superior position, some astrologers would say, well, Saturn's going to have a little bit more control over the situation. But I feel like actually in August, there's going to be some breakthroughs and some opportunities to kind of like really push forward. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of that. But in December, Saturn is direct. Saturn is in charge. Saturn is also now heading towards the late degrees of Pisces. Eventually in the spring of next year, we'll go into Aries briefly. So Jupiter is retrograde. And something to kind of think about is that This is right after a Mercury retrograde that will be in Sagittarius, which is going to be absolutely Looney Tunes. The Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius will be nuts, as all Mercury retrogrades this year are going to be a little bit more, I think, they're going to be kind of blown out of proportion because, Jupiter is in its opposite sign. At least we have some mutual reception. So, it'll be after the Mercury retrograde. I do anticipate there's going to be lots of delays in travel over the holidays, end of November into December of 2024, because Mercury is retrograde in Sagittarius. It rules airplanes, because it's going to be in opposition to Jupiter, which means there may be new document requirements, there may be new laws. This may also kind of tie into visas and passports and things like that. This can also be very weather related, because we're seeing these squares in mutable signs, and Saturn in Pisces could be flooding. It could also be lots of issues pertaining to immigration. Saturn in Pisces is very much about that. And who can go where, and showing paperwork to be able to travel and kind of get in and out of places. So if you're planning on going home for the holidays, obviously everybody's astrology is going to be different. This is why it pays to know your chart or talk to an astrologer. I would say traveling, really any time from November through January is going to be, I think, a little bit more challenging because of the setup that's going on. Anyway, so, Jupiter will be retrograde. So I don't feel like we're going to have as much strength in being able to break through the Jupiter area of our life. While you're in between, right? So you're going to have this square that's going to happen in August. While you're in between, August and December, we integrate. Right? We go, okay, we had a little bit of a setback here. There was a little bit of a challenge. We couldn't quite launch something, or it wasn't the right time, or, I had to kind of reconfigure something. And you want to be working with that basically between now and December. And then in December, we're going to hit another speed bump, and we're going to have to integrate again, kind of make some changes, which thankfully mutable signs are good at doing. I think about how Jupiter is the dispositor of Saturn. So if you're somebody who follows, Hellenistic astrology, you practice, like that kind of background, Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. So that's something else to kind of consider. In that sense, I think they are speaking to each other in a way that is actually rather beautiful. Jupiter is more seen as the kind of feminine version when it's in Pisces versus the masculine version when it's in Sagittarius. When it's in Pisces, it's about having no bounds emotionally, having no bounds psychically. It can mean that we're more empathic, we're more in tune, but it can also mean that we're kind of catching other people's vibes. We can be a lot more tired. We can feel a lot more sensitive to what we're hearing, what we're talking about, what we're learning. And also it can make us feel a little kind of mentally frazzled, I think, being in the sign of Gemini. And then I look at, when we have the square. So now let's go back to August. When we have the square on the 19th, anytime I'm looking at anything going on with Jupiter, I'm like, where is Mercury? Because Mercury rules Gemini, it's the dispositor. So there should be something brewing with Mercury already because of the Jupiter-Saturn square, but also because Jupiter will be coming into conjunction with Mars. And what you're going to see is that, well, Mercury actually is conjunct the Sun. It just a day prior actually had a cazimi, is what it looks like, right around the time of the full moon in Aquarius. And you guys are going to hear me talk about that. I talk about it in my horoscopes. I'm going to talk about it in my monthly address on Thursday. But there is super holy cow stuff going on in mid-August. There are so many things happening. But Mercury will cazimi with the Sun, which means that this is the halfway point through the Mercury retrograde that we'll be having in August. If you don't know what the retrograde is about, likely this is when you find out, because the Sun represents awareness, and Mercury retrograde conjunct the Sun is like, oh, I figured out the solution, or I found my missing car keys, or I heard from that person that I've been waiting to hear back from. It's considered fortuitous. And, for this to be happening on a full moon, which is ruled by Uranus, and it's square Uranus, and Mercury is square Uranus, you guys bet your bottom dollar that basically the 15th through the 20th of August, something very big is going to happen. And I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I can only speculate, and my speculation is that Generally, when we see Jupiter square Saturn, we see a rather kind of pivotal downturn in the markets. That's generally what we see. Because we are not feeling as optimistic because Saturn's got his lasso around Jupiter and he's trying to pull him back, right? He's saying, don't talk about it, don't share about it, or, you know, now I'm not so optimistic about something that I was thinking before. And the Cazimi is taking place in Leo. So it is about the stock market. It is going to be about some kind of, you know, Hollywood gossip. It may be about some significant sports star. It may be about some significant actor or actress. And we kind of get word or kind of wind that somebody may potentially, you know, die in a car accident. I don't like saying that, but that could happen with Mars and Jupiter. It could be impact and speed. And the square to Saturn could be something where, you know, they're unfortunately kind of, you know, transitioning. I'm only speculating, but these are my interpretations of kind of the planets. I think the other thing that I think about is that the Cazimi is about increasing information, right? So it's bringing light to something. And when this is reverberating off of the, you know, sextile and also the stuff that's going on with Mars and Jupiter, this is going to be about newspapers. It's going to be about headlines. It's going to be about media, you know, journalists, everybody having to kind of break a story suddenly and very quickly. Now, when we think about, you know, the incoming Mars-Jupiter conjunction, and I really should do a completely separate video on this. I may do that because if we weren't even looking at Saturn, you know, Mars conjunct Jupiter in its own right is a pretty big deal. I would generally consider that a very favorable transit, to be honest with you. If we weren't looking at, you know, the dispositor going retrograde and oppose the full moon, like I would be like, that's not a bad transit. Because Mars rules the North Node. So when we think about the North Node in Aries, basically this is encouraging us to be independent, to be fearless, to initiate new things, to be bold, brave, active. And it has the warrior spirit, right? It is about, you know, kind of jumping into something head first and doing it. It represents that match that we strike, right? That's Aries. So when we put Mars in Gemini, we're taking action by power walking, biking. We are finally making an effort to, you know, be reading. Maybe we are making an effort to be learning. Maybe we're going on road trips, we're traveling, we're going places, we're doing things. So when you merge Mars and Gemini with Jupiter, you are taking the philosopher, the teacher, the wise one, the gambler, you know, the great kind of benefic, and you're joining it with Mars, which means people are going to be ridiculously beyond belief confident, probably a little too confident in some places. So, you know, the pro is that Mars conjunct Jupiter is words in action, right? Manifestation happening because we are writing it down, we're saying it, and we're actually doing it. That's really the benefit, and that's really how to kind of work best with that conjunction. It makes us brave. We're going to see some very courageous, you know, journalists and newscasters and people who are likely going to be standing up and speaking out against Saturn. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a second. The other side of this is that it amplifies Jupiter. Mars is anger. It amplifies talk of war. It amplifies frustration. It makes us more likely to argue. It can feel like there are empty debates and we're just screaming into the void because this conjunction will be coming into a square with Saturn. So as, you know, Jupiter squares Saturn, Mars is nearby, and it means that basically, you know, some people are going to have like almost like a knee-jerk reaction to post something on the internet or post a blog or, you know, get active in their community. I don't like saying this, but I'm fairly confident we're going to see some protests and some stuff that's going to be kind of going on with this conjunction. And the square to Saturn is basically saying Saturn is going to want to squash it. It's going to want to limit it. It's going to want to keep it from happening, keeping people from organizing, keeping people from posting, keeping people from being seen, because Saturn is in Pisces. It's about what's hidden and what you cannot find. So if you are limited from finding the information, people might get kind of riled up about, you know, what is kind of going missing on the internet or what they're not able to kind of repost. Anyway. When I sat down and I thought about it and I was like, if I had to come up with a phrase with this Mars, Jupiter, square Saturn, what would it be? And what came up for me was, if we're trying to grow externally without trying to grow within first, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just spinning our wheels. Okay, so if you're trying to grow externally, very Jupiter, Mars, let's go, right? And it's active, it's dynamic, it's air, so it moves around. And sometimes, Mars and Gemini can be a little chaotic. When that square comes into Saturn, if we are not growing internally, emotionally, spiritually, then we're not going to go anywhere at all. Then we're just basically going, it could just be chaotic. So think about that for a second, right? We need belief, faith, and the ability to practice discernment before moving forward. I'm sure all of you guys have heard the term sleep on it, right? This is one of those transits in mid-August that if you're getting riled up about something, if you want to confront somebody, if you want to get into it with someone, if you want to rush through something, just sleep on it, right? Saturn and Pisces, just sleep on it. Take a day or two or three to sleep on it. Really work through your frustration or your anger. Write a letter, go for a run, do something, but don't act on it immediately, right? We need, proper commitment to be able to grow for us to proceed forward. We need a vision, we need a plan. Otherwise, like I said, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction is chaotic, it's scattered, and it may flat out not go very well. Or it may be something that you try to launch that is not as successful, right? Obviously, I know people don't want to hear that, but that's kind of the truth, especially those of you guys who in the midst of this Mercury retrograde, I know a lot of you guys are thinking about, well, I want to change my job, Mercury retrograde in Virgo, it's going back into Leo. I want to do something I love more. I want something more creative. And I would say then not a good time to launch a website for a business, right? Gemini could very much be about commerce and trade in a website or a social media platform that you're trying to kind of promote, right? It may not have as much traction. You may not get as much visibility. Don't jump into a new job or, start doing something if you're not educated, if you're not informed. Certainly, Mars is, very rambunctious, especially in Gemini, to kind of multitask and be able to, say like, oh, I read a book on that, or I did a 2-week course. I think I'm good to go. And I would say like, maybe not, it may pay actually to take a little bit more time to really refine some of those tools that you've been kind of developing, or those skills that you've been developing before you decide that you're going to kind of haul off and you're going to, quit your job, right? How am I seeing this? Well, there's a number of different ways that I'm seeing this. For starters, and this is something that I think is more so directly correlated to the Mercury retrograde, but because, Jupiter is reverberating off of this. So once again, the square between Jupiter is going to be taking place around the 19th between Jupiter and Saturn, okay? But there we go, so the 19th. But because Mars is around, and because we're going to see Mars and Jupiter conjunct on the 14th, so it ramps up that mental energy, and then we are going to see Mars square Saturn on the 15th, and then we see Jupiter that's going to be squaring. It's pretty much like that whole week, right? So it's essentially going to be from August 13th until Jupiter starts coming out of the square. And I would say by like the 22nd or so, it's going to start separating. Okay, that's a whole week where we just need to kind of like cool our jets. Anyway, so how am I seeing this? Well, I'm seeing this a number of different ways. I feel like now is the time for people to stop caring about what other people think. And I know that that's not really a popular thing to say on the internet, but you got to make waves somehow. I feel like there's a fine line between being confident and being cocky. And I think a lot of people are going to learn that in this transit, because Jupiter-Mars can be incredibly confident, but it could get too cocky. And if it does, it's going to get checked by Saturn, where if you just say that one thing that usually would slide, it's not going to slide during this transit. You would make that one post on a social media platform that usually isn't a big deal, it's going to get flagged during this transit. And with that being said, it's about not caring what people think, but also not stepping over the line, not disrespecting other people. Yes, it's time to share our opinions. Mars is important, ruling the North Node. It wants us to learn. It wants us to also know what we're talking about. Make sure we have the right facts and figures. After this transit, Mars will come into a square with Neptune as well. So people could get really heated and kind of hyped over something We could see people taking to the streets, protesting, people getting really heated over some news that breaks, and not be kind of exercising that properly. Don't expect everyone to agree with you. I think that's the other thing that I would say with this square is that, you may have a certain opinion, you may want to share that opinion, but not everybody is going to be tolerant of that. Even if other people aren't, I would say we want to practice patience. We want to be respectful of other people. We want to try to understand where other people are coming from rather than just talking over them. Mars, Jupiter, right? I was listening to, I think it was like another astrologer was like posting, talking about the Jordan Peterson interview, or Jordan Peterson was interviewed by Elon Musk, or he was interviewing Elon Musk. And it was an interesting interview. I couldn't watch all of it because frankly, and I'm glad it wasn't just me, I tried to watch as much of it as I could, but it almost seemed like the body language and the demeanor of Jordan Peterson, he was just like hunched over and he was like talking at Elon, and he was just talking nonstop. He's also like, very high on the intelligence scale when it comes to his background and kind of, working as a professor and a psychologist. So maybe that was part of it, but somebody was saying that he was also going through like a Jupiter-Mercury transit or a Jupiter-Mercury-Mars aspect. And you could just see in the whole interview, it almost seemed like he was just like raging in how he was communicating. And so I observed that, and then I saw somebody talk about it on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. There was some kind of Jupiter-Mercury thing going on where it was just overloaded with information and also intensity. Anyway, so we can kind of see some of that stuff. Where are we actually having a debate, or are we talking over each other? Are we trying to see each other's perspective, or are we just flat out arguing? There's a difference between arguing and debating. Debating, at least debates used to be a rather respectable thing to kind of watch and also like partake in, but it just seems like people come out swinging these days. This is also, I think, a month of spiritual tests. Okay, so any square to Saturn is a test. Moral test to see if you're going to, say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hide something. I'm not going to lie about something. I'm not going to push off the responsibility on another person. I'm not going to manipulate documents. I'm not going to forge documents. I'm not going to say I did something that I didn't do, because that can kind of come up. Saturn can be expecting Jupiter to obey. And so there can be a sense of trying to change or manipulate words, definitions, change documents and stuff. Obviously, right, Gemini. So there's that. So I think that we may hear some big news about the fact that things are being changed in that capacity, which is nothing new. We've actually seen a lot of this in recent years with, a lot of changes of definitions when it comes to financial stuff, when it comes to medical stuff. That's been very common. I think it was a year ago, I told you guys that now is a really good time to start buying physical books, right? Real books, medical books, holistic healing books, herbal books, books on history. If you guys feel like you want to buy, physical literature for religion or Bibles or whatever, you want to have something that you can reference, because the internet can change. Yes, there's always a record. Thank God there's always people out there that are saving information and taking screenshots, whatever. But if you have physical text, you have something you can reference. And I feel like this is definitely going to be laws that are coming up that's going to be about cutting or removing things from books, or banning certain books, or people's ability to buy certain books, right? Really, really interesting stuff, because Jupiter is about publishing, by the way. We may also see some conflict erupting revolving around government oversight over education, and people getting kind of up in arms about education. Gemini is going to be more kind of elementary school, maybe through middle school, but it will be younger people. But when I say spiritual tests, I mean that, Saturn is the Lord of karma. So, with the square to Jupiter, it really does reference the fact that, we are being tested to see if we are going to speak up and stand up, and we're going to speak out against Saturn in Pisces. If we are going to call a spade and kind of be honest about some things that we see that are going on, even if we fear saying something, right? But this is about faith over fear. And that's the irony of the situation, is that Whether you look at Jupiter as the dispositor of Saturn, or you look at the fact that Mars is coming into conjunction with Jupiter, which is encouraging Jupiter to be brave, we have to practice faith over fear. This is a month that even if you're not a religious person, you may find that you're making time for mindfulness, or you're trying to connect with your higher self, or you're praying, or you're reading spiritual or religious texts. That's very much Jupiter, I think conjunct Mars. That's why I laughed when I saw the tent thing that kind of came up in the Sabian symbols, because it talks about a revival. I think we're going to see lots of talk on the internet about a revival of, religion and organized religion and practice religion, and people kind of coming together in their communities where they're going to be sharing and preaching and kind of getting on their soapboxes. You may see people just straight up reading from the Bible, and trying to organize in some capacity, or bringing people together through posts and trying to share information, or trying to kind of encourage other people. But remember what the Sabian symbol said as well. Are we trying to kind of rile people up? Are we trying to kind of cause a ruckus? I think about the Jupiter-Saturn square, and something that has always kind of stuck with me. I have Jupiter in hard aspect to Saturn. It opposes Saturn, and something that I've always kind of kept somewhere nearby is that, quote, a setback is always a setup for an excellent comeback, right? So we will feel a bit delayed. We might feel like we're hitting a speed bump or a stop sign, but that doesn't mean that we have to quit, or we're throwing in the towel, or we're giving up. It's just a moment where we have to say, maybe I need to stop and reconfigure this. I need to rethink something. I actually should take a little bit more time before I, decide to go back to work so I can finish my studies. I should take my time when it comes to driving across the country. I should take my time when it comes to writing my book, because I want it to be really good. These are things that we're going to learn from Saturn, that actually if we take our time, then we're more likely to be successful. We're going to be rewarded, right? We know that the two greatest warriors are patience and time. Certainly Mars is not good at patience, maybe doesn't always understand time because he's always in a rush. But Saturn understands that. Saturn understands patience and time. And so if we're kind of leaning more into the Mars-Jupiter, yeah, let's go, let's do it right now, we're not really taking time to really plan it all out, right? It may be kind of done haphazardly, and it may not necessarily kind of go the whole way. I also think about the connection with Jupiter and prayer. And once again, whether or not you're religious or not, I made the reference earlier this year when I was talking about this up and coming square, that it reminded me of that country song, some of the biggest blessings are unanswered prayers. And I think that's very much connected to, even though Saturn is in Pisces and Neptune is in Pisces, some of us feel like, is there anybody up there? Does anybody hear me? Certainly I've talked to a lot of clients, I've talked to a lot of friends as well, people who are like, man, I'm just really starting to question my faith, is there a plan? Is there something, bigger than me that is intervening? Is there some kind of divine intervention with what's going on in the world? And for some of you guys, there can be events that make you believe in something again. And it doesn't mean that it has to be religious or spiritual. You may see, a major comeback for a sports star, and it makes you believe in wanting to watch that particular sport again. Or you may see some major kind of breakthrough for an underdog that makes you want to kind of, support that person that you didn't think was going to kind of make it. It doesn't matter. This is a time where I feel like we're really learning that it's not that we are being denied, it's that we're being delayed for a reason, for a purpose. So you may be asking for something, praying for something, please let this happen, let this go through, let it go through, and then it doesn't happen. And you're like, okay, am I doing something wrong? Did I anger the gods? And you may be just having one of those days where, you can be having a crisis of faith, or you can be having doubt in your beliefs, or even in yourself. And I really feel like if there is a delay taking place this month for something, it's taking place for good reason. Maybe the universe has bigger plans for you. Maybe what you're hoping and anticipating that's going to come is not going to come the way that you think it is, and it's going to be much bigger and much greater than you think. It's not ready yet, right? The cake is not ready to come out of the oven yet, so we don't want to mess with it. We don't want to keep opening the oven. We want to let it kind of sit. We want to let it cook. So keep that in mind that, you may be praying or asking for something and, you might be asking for that partner that is not the right partner for you. Maybe in your heart of hearts, you know it, and you're just praying, let this work, let us come together, let it work, and it doesn't work. It actually, the relationship fractures and it falls apart. And you can't understand why, because you've been praying for a healthy relationship, but what you may not realize is that the universe may know that that's actually not the partner you're supposed to be with. And you go through the breakup, and then 6 months later, you meet the love of your life. And then it all makes sense at that moment why it didn't work out with that person, right? Or why it didn't work out with that job, because the universe had something else, kind of in mind. So I try to see the silver lining in these squares because I really feel like there is a method to the madness, and certainly so many other things that are kind of going on in the background. Obviously, there's been so much news in the last week or so. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of insight into how I'm already starting to see some of this stuff stepping up. I have to tell you guys point blank, I've got Jupiter transiting through my ninth house right now, which sounds like a good thing. But I'm already feeling the Saturn square. And so for me, I kind of feel like it's been really interesting. I've been very reflective about some of the things that are going on in the world. And for me, it's been a lot about my beliefs about the world and how things work and what is right or wrong. And so it might be a little bit of me on my soapbox with this square to Saturn, but whatever. So here's some things that I started already kind of seeing, even though we're not there yet. So in honor of the moon in Gemini today, all right, let me pull up today's transits. So the moon's in Gemini today. It's obviously conjunct, let's go back. It's conjunct Mars and Jupiter. So this is a very chatty day. There we go. Right? I think this is the right day. Very chatty day. So I'm going to give you a series of phrases, and I'm going to say, let's talk about. And then I'm going to give you my little rap sheet. I'll give you a couple bullet points for each and every one of these. But I would encourage you guys, talk about this in the comments with me. I know that some of this stuff is going to be super controversial, so I'm just going to flat out tell you, I don't care if you guys agree with me or you don't agree with me. But I would like to see you guys kind of talk about it and kind of share, because I think the comment section is going to be very telling with some of the squares that we're going to see to Saturn, and how maybe it's important to read and listen to what people are saying, because we might actually see something, or we might actually learn something, especially a different perspective that we did not see before, right? Saturn, square Saturn, all this is square Saturn. All right, so play along with me. Let's talk Olympic Games, right? So we're going to talk the Olympic Games. I'm thinking about in August when Mars is coming into conjunction with Jupiter. I'm thinking about how that definitely is this theme of things being bigger than life, right? When it comes to athletes, when it comes to sports, when it comes to anything that's going to require some kind of physical action. And so I wonder, is this going to be about some of these people who are going to be performing that are potentially kind of getting hit by Saturn? And Saturn could be disqualifications. Saturn could be limiting visibility and airtime. Saturn could be limiting somebody's, ability to, place for whatever reason. On the other hand, Mars-Saturn squares, which once again is a different video, is definitely like a clash that can be with authority. It could also be where there is some kind of action, or there is some kind of aggression that's kind of coming up, or some kind of combativeness that's kind of coming up with authority. So I wonder if this is going to be more talk about issues revolving around people being in some places in Paris that could be dangerous, where people are maybe getting mugged, or we're starting to see more issues with transportation. In the last week or so, we saw a major power outage that happened in Paris. Supposedly there was some kind of sabotage that was going on, whether it was physical or I think it was more digital, with the subway or the train stations from being able to get around, right? So that's one. And I wonder, and I hope not, touch wood, but I wonder, is there going to be some sort of chaos that's kind of going on in Paris around the games, right? So I wonder about that. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that have kind of gone on, but I'll talk about that as we kind of move through this. Just recently, actually, I think it was yesterday or today, I just saw a news article that was talking about how there was a major stabbing that happened in the UK. I think it happened in Britain. But supposedly there was like 7 or 8 people that were stabbed in public. Also kind of very Mars square Saturn, but Mars is getting closer and closer to Jupiter, right? I think about also, and this kind of ties into another topic, but with Mars being involved in the square to Saturn, and Mars is about these athletes and people who are going to be more active, that square to Saturn in Pisces can be about restrictions or limitations when it comes to their religious beliefs. Now, we will talk about some of the Olympic Games in a second, but I want to speak more on the fact that it was stipulated and it was mandatory for athletes to refrain from any display of religious affiliation or beliefs. We saw that there was somebody for the Olympic surf competition that was told he had to remove any kind of religious symbols from his surfboard. We have also seen other athletes that have had to go as far as using sign language when they were competing to the cameras to tell the cameras about their religious beliefs. We saw a woman do that. I want to say she was from Brazil, which is very Gemini. We see her using her hands saying something about Jesus, which is very interesting because, well, you can't talk about it, right? Mars or Jupiter square Saturn is, you're not supposed to talk about it, but how else are you using your hands? We also saw an Olympic tennis player, I forget his name, he's well known, in one of these photos that's kind of surfaced on the internet where he didn't say anything. He just took the chain around his neck and he held up a cross. These are all very much the squares from Gemini to Saturn and Pisces. Very interesting stuff. Let's talk censorship and shadow banning. Obviously YouTube's favorite word, so I got to watch it. But I will just go as far as saying major news throughout this last week, depending on where you get your news. It's a really good time to have more than one news station or news source, by the way, right? Gemini is doubles, so with Jupiter and Mars being in conjunction or coming into conjunction with each other in Gemini, you want to have more than one app for news. You want to be watching more than one station, listening to more than one radio station. There are going to be things that are going to come out that you may not see on some legacy media. Okay, that's the limitation of Saturn. Anyway, so this is kind of like, let's talk censorship, let's talk media, let's talk shadow banning. Well, in this last week, we hear news that Meta, as well as ChatGPT and also Google, is under fire for having no search visibility for Donald Trump, and also no record when you ask through ChatGPT, as well as asking Meta about the attack on President Trump that happened almost 2 weeks ago. Nothing is coming up. You're asking about it and it says that there's no information, and it prompts you with a bunch of other things that I'm not going to get into, but that for me was very, you go and you use an app, you ask it a question, you're trying to get information, you're trying to get data, you're searching for the truth, Mars, Jupiter. And the square to Saturn is, it could have, we got to be careful. It may or may not have happened, or we don't have any, record on it, or you go into Google and you're trying to search for it and the name does not come up. Now, I'm just going to preface this because I feel like I've gotten a couple comments and messages about this. I am Switzerland, guys. I feel like, unfortunately, I personally cannot believe that these two candidates are a real reflection of what America wants. That's really where I stand on this. I've always been a libertarian. I probably always will be. And I'm kind of divided on how I feel about what's going on with the election. But I will tell you that it's my job to talk to you guys about the astrology. And what the astrology is saying is that the powers that be, Saturn and Pisces, are working really hard to keep people from being able to get information, from being able to share information, from being able to search for information, for being able to verify things. And now we're possibly going to see information that's going to be disappearing, right? So that's that. So let's talk about the news around failure of leadership. Okay. So this is just my thought on this, but I feel like people are so focused on arguing politics and picking teams that they're failing to see that there is a complete absence of leadership. In the last week, we saw President Biden announce that he will not be seeking re-election. Kamala Harris, who is now campaigning, essentially. We're going to have the Democratic convention taking place in mid-August when all of these chaotic things are happening. And it makes me feel like I think people need to be prepared that there may not be a lot of unity revolving around ultimately who they decide to move forward with. There's going to be a lot of conflict that's going to be happening. If you guys want to know about that, check out my 2024 election webinar. It's over 4 hours long. It's in the description below. You can take a look and see what I think. But I'm more concerned about the fact that there's information that is being reported that it was possible that there was going to be an invocation of the 25th Amendment against Biden. And essentially he made the decision to step down, and that there was going to be support that was going to be not only from Kamala Harris, but also with other high-ranking Democrats. So we kind of see this forcefulness of Mars and Jupiter, make the statement, or, make the decision, choose the team. And Saturn in Pisces is kind of orchestrating things in the background. So you're going to see that there is going to be this increased tendency to want to force stuff, to want to push people to say things or do things, or that things are going to rapidly kind of go in one direction. And if they, start to see something stalling, we'll see another option that kind of opens up. And that goes for both parties, by the way. I'll give you guys a spoiler, but at the end of my video, I talk a lot about, well, this is what it looks for this candidate. This is what it looks for this candidate. I recorded it during the debate, but right before the debate. And I thought that Biden would step down. I thought that was going to happen around this time that I'm talking about in August, and that eventually we would see Kamala, step in, at least as president in the interim. Whether or not they run her or not, or whether or not, Trump makes it to election day or stays with his vice president, that's not really here nor there. That's all speculation. I just know that we're going to see a major kind of change in direction where the media may run with something, and we're going to hear the media kind of talking about some stuff that maybe like I said, the powers that be don't want them talking about, and that could be independent media, that could be some newscasters or channels of sorts. But I'm more focused on people. I think maybe people are really starting to ask questions now. Who knew about President Biden's decline? Did Kamala know? Did other people, in the Democratic Party know? Why were there so many parroted points over the last year? Plus that, he's sharp, he's good, he's got it together. How do we get from that for a year or more to seeing him on the debate stage and then everybody quickly kind of Julius Caesaring him literally right after the debate, where all of the people at the round table were like, this is terrible, he's done. Was it planned? That's something that I kind of wonder. I wonder also if it's that serious that he either felt the need to say, I'm not seeking re-election, or if he felt the need to step down, or pass, if he passes the torch. I kind of wonder, who's running the country? I think about that. Who's running the country? And that's not me politicking. If it's that serious that he's not capable of running, why is he in office right now, right? That's what I wonder. I think it's very likely that Kamala Harris will actually move into the presidency spot before the election. I think that's very, very likely. However, a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to her chart. So check out the webinar that I put together. All right, that's enough around that, but ask yourself who's running the show, because I think that we're going to hear more of that kind of uptick over the next month. Let's talk religion. Okay, so let's talk religion. I was sitting with this for a little bit, and I was like, what is something that kind of comes to mind about some of the Jupiter-Saturn square? And for me, it was evil preaches tolerance until it's dominant, then it tries to silence the good. Okay, so evil preaches tolerance until it's dominant, then it tries to silence the good. Jupiter is good. It's the great benefic. It is positive. It's optimistic. It's very generous, right? And so we may see that there can be some limiting of the generosity, the joy, the positivity. This week, obviously, some really sensitive topics revolving around the Olympic Games. I will just say that I feel like that is more stemming from both the Mercury shadow, where there's just been a lot of talk about people who have been really upset or shocked or surprised by what they're seeing or what they're reading or what they're learning. We're also coming into Venus square Uranus. So I remember saying to you guys that when Mercury was in the square to Uranus, we're going to see some shocking, surprising news. It ended up being, stars in a sense of, I think performers. And now here comes Venus for the square with Uranus. So this is going to be the relationship fallout, the financial fallout as a result of that. But specifically on religion, because, well, Jupiter is very spiritual and philosophical, and religion is connected to Pisces. We saw recently a notable Archbishop Vigano came out and issued a 2-page letter, and he was condemning the Olympic Games symbolism and calling for a boycott of the Games. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably because they took their videos down off of YouTube. You cannot see them. They're no longer there because they were getting such backlash. But just to put it very simply, the opening games and the performances and the art that were displayed offended a lot of people. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not it was connected to mythology and things connecting to stuff that was more interpretations of mythology and art and performance. But there were images that were coming out and also video that was coming out where a lot of Catholics and Christians and even people who aren't of that faith were very taken back and disturbed because they felt like they were mocking their religion with what appeared to be a interpretation of the Last Supper. Okay, so once again, whether that was the case or not the case, and there are some people debating saying that was not the case. I will just reference, then why did the Olympics come out and apologize to Christians? If you guys want to know my opinions, you're going to see a lot of them. Go follow me at BTV Astro on X. I made a whole statement about it, but a lot of people were really upset by it. There was also a lot of people who felt like there was some rather ominous and apocalyptic symbolism that was going on, not to mention display of men's genitals on live television with a whole bunch of people and children being there. So personally, I can't comprehend it. Like, I can't understand how that was okay, but that's what they decided to do. So that's their stuff. But on religion, we've got people writing letters, archbishops speaking out against what was on screens, Pisces, speaking out against manipulation, distortion, hidden agendas, very Saturn and Pisces, guys. We also see that because of the major uproar, there has also been, a ton of financial response. Okay, so people like Samsung just pulled $1 billion in funding from the Olympic Games. There's been other companies as well. I've been seeing stuff on X where people are saying, just got out of a board meeting, we've been voting on this, we are now deciding to withdraw our funding for the Olympics. And they came out and made a statement and they apologized, saying that it was not what people thought it was, but there was a lot of things that are just, I'm just gonna say, questionable. So what are your thoughts on that? Let's talk religion, let's talk performance art, let's talk Olympics. These are just a couple bullet points, but just for me, I've been thinking about, Jupiter in Gemini and how it's supposed to be expanding communication and learning and sharing, and it's supposed to be helping connect us. This is a very social sign. And it's, coming into this square with Saturn, which I feel like it's making us, I think, a little bit blocked when it comes to communicating, when it comes to sharing the good things in our lives, to celebrating the good things in our lives, because of the heaviness that's going on right now, because of people who, I talk to probably 5 or 6 people a day. I get on the phone or I get on a call with somebody and, it's like, okay, what's going to happen with the election? Are we going to go into nuclear war? Is it going to be the end of the world? Is it the end of the United States? Is the stock market going to crash? Such a heavy thing. People are carrying around so many heavy things. Because of the heaviness of the world, it's impacting our ability to think positively, right? Jupiter in Gemini, to think positively. But we can't just wait for the sky to fall, right? We can't just put our life on hold because, the ominous things. We can't keep ourselves from going and planning trips. We can't keep ourselves from wanting to, you know, share some of our happy life accomplishments with people because of what's going on. We can't let the heaviness of the world sidetrack us, live rent-free in our minds, and keep us from being optimistic about the future, because the future is made now. The actions that you take to overcome and decide that you're not going to stop believing, you're going to keep moving forward, even in spite of the things that are happening. And part of it's having the information and knowing that there's going to be speed bumps or challenges, but you just keep forward anyway, right? Let's talk doom scrolling, right? Saturn is, for me, Saturn and Neptune are in my 6th house. So it's been a lot of being like, how much time am I spending just like doom scrolling? But I think about how, you know, usage of information, text, media, exchange with Jupiter and Gemini is really magnifying how much we're on our phones. It seems like news is breaking so much faster. There's so many things that are bombarding news cycles. There's so much stuff that's constantly kind of coming out, and that can kind of feed into what I said, the heaviness and the effect that it has on our mind. But how much time are we actually giving away Saturn retrograde? Because we are, you know, scrolling too much, we're hanging out on Instagram, we're more focused on, you know, kind of complaining about things or getting agitated about things. So much about Saturn and Pisces, it's taught me to observe, right? It's taught me to just to observe. It's just like, just watch what's going on. You don't need to react. Just watch what's happening. Take it all in. Really, really reevaluate this situation. Like I said, my favorite term has become sleep on it rather than just a knee-jerk reaction. I'm learning to be like, nope, it's going to take a little bit of time. We have to feel our way into it with Saturn and Pisces. But I would really encourage you guys, some things that you could be doing outside of doom scrolling is going for a walk, going for a bike ride, journaling, reading a book, listening to something that's going to be motivating. Drown out all the noise. Don't be so focused on, you know, this, that, or the other. I promise you, you could take a whole day away from the news and you're going to see the same shit tomorrow. You're not going to see much that's going to change, right? So as these heavy things start coming in, learn to observe. Focus more on, you know, taking the necessary steps, moving forward, being proactive, and inspiring yourself to learn a new skill, learn a new hobby, learn a new language. Rather than scrolling through Instagram or, you know, hanging out on Facebook or on Twitter, go and get an app that's going to be trivia based, right? Go and get an app where you can learn how to play chess, something that's going to be about strategy and also knowledge. Go and get one of those apps where maybe you can't commit to, you know, reading a book. Well, you can go and get Audible, or you can decide that you're going to go and get one of those apps where you can read chunks of books every day, or you're getting facts every day, or you're expanding your vocabulary, right? These are the things that we want to be doing to be able to kind of offset the square to Saturn. And also lack of attention span. This is something I've been sitting with for a while. I think last year is when I started looking at the square and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to have to make shorter videos because I really don't think people are going to sit through them. Because, you know, Gemini is about what we learn, and it's about what we're reading, or what we're kind of like absorbing information wise. And I knew that a lot of people were going to be feeling, well, I don't want to hear negative news. Like this is, you know, this is terrible. And I occasionally see those comments on my horoscopes and I'm like, well, sorry, you know, I'm not going to tell you guys, I'm not going to blow smoke up your guys' rear ends. I'm going to tell you what I think is actually going to happen, because I think that it's better to be informed than to be unprepared, right? So to be informed rather than be unprepared. But lack of attention span, that's a thing, man. I mean, if we have all this stimulation with Mars and Jupiter and all these planets and Gemini, and we've all done it. We've all been sitting there watching Netflix as we're scrolling, or, you know, we've all, you know, been there where we're trying to, you know, listen to a podcast while we're trying to do something else. We can get really overstimulated very easily with all these planets in Gemini. And I feel like that can actually lessen our ability to stay focused. So it's really important to be mindful that even if you can't sit through, you know, a 2-hour-long astrology video or a whole lecture or, you know, whatever, you're still taking time and you're taking notes, or maybe you're doing a program that study at your own pace. You're taking it in small amounts and easily, kind of more easily digestible chapters. Maybe you can't read 50 pages a night, but I'm sure you could read a chapter. You know what I'm saying? Try to create systems and things for you guys that's going to be a little bit easier for you to stay focused and stay on task, because I know it's going to be really hard and a lot of us are going to have a very short attention span. I think all of the things happening are really directly connected to the Mercury retrograde. You know, it's going to be in Virgo in August. We've got it coming up pretty soon. And because it's the dispositor of Jupiter, it's trying to get all of us to kind of think about our habits. And, you know, I have Mercury that's going to be going retrograde in my 12th house. And usually when that happens, I fall off my habits. I'm really good about, you know, getting up early in the morning or working out or, you know, organizing things, making my bed, whatever, just, you know, silly Virgo things. But I've noticed the last 2 years when I've had retrogrades from Libra into Virgo that I fell off of my habits. I actually completely got sidetracked and I stopped going to Pilates or the gym, or I stopped eating well or sleeping well, and then, you know, would pick up smoking or something, you know, like that would happen. So this time I decided to be prepared, and I was like, no, that's not going to happen this time around. And I got a book that I just want to share with you guys. It's an amazing book. I don't have it on my table, but it's called Automatic Habits. It's a bestseller. It's all over Amazon. I cannot recommend it enough. I'm like more than 100 and something pages in, and I'm kind of mind blown looking at the process of how to create better habits and how to recognize bad habits and how to work with them and how to set new ones. And I think that that can be really helpful for a lot of people right now through the retrograde and that kind of connection and correlation. So if you're looking for a book to kind of help you get your shift in order, I cannot say enough good things about this book. It is phenomenal, and it's really changed the direction and how I'm kind of going with some of the goals that I have. So it's a good recommendation for you. All right, just to kind of wrap this up, here's the deal, right? A lot of astrologers are going to say, well, Saturn's going to screw you. He's going to deny something. He's not going to let you move forward. I don't really agree with that. I feel like it's interesting that we're going to see the Saturn-Jupiter square happen several times, and then finally we're going to have it next year. That's going to be in cardinal signs. Another video for another day. But I do want to tell you guys something. If this were me, and I think I talked about this in my horoscope, so if you're wondering how this is impacting you for the 12 rising signs, go and check out my August horoscopes. I believe that if you do your Saturn work and you get that Saturn work done, you will then be able to expand in the Jupiter area of your chart that you would like to expand. Okay, so you have to do the Saturn work first, and then Jupiter can expand. So I say this, and I do think that this is important, because when we get to the second half of 2025, so you guys know we have the first square now, we're going to have another square that's going to happen in December. But when we get to the second half of 2025, we are then going to see Jupiter go into Cancer, so he will be in his exaltation. It's in a feminine sign, but whatever. And then we're going to see Jupiter that's going to trine Saturn. Remember, trines are fortuitous. It's a Jupiter energy. It's free-flowing. But equally, this is happening in water signs. So it's emotional. It is sensitive. It brings a sense of sensitivity. It's about intuition. It's about emotional clearing. Jupiter in Cancer may expand our emotions, our intuition, our homes, our family. And when we have Saturn now in harmony with Jupiter, you know, Jupiter can now grow because of the stability and the support that stems from Saturn. So this is a really good thing. We're going to see some really powerful transits. Look at Scorpio season 2025, Mars in Scorpio, Jupiter in Cancer. Some really great things that are going to be kind of taking place. And I really feel like it can produce some amazing change. So it's not all sacrifice. Maybe you hit a speed bump this month. Maybe you hit another one at the end of the year, but that shouldn't kind of knock you off of your course. The key here is to really focus on that commitment right now with Saturn, you know, square Jupiter. You're going to be feeling it all month long. I feel like the reward will be worth the sacrifice. That's the one thing that I want to tell you. The reward will be worth the sacrifice. Jupiter in Gemini means you may have to move to have a better home or living situation next year. You may have to develop new skills or learn new things to be able to communicate better, you know, especially with your family, because Jupiter going to Cancer, with your siblings, what have you. You may potentially have to go back to school to improve your career. But I think the reward will be worth the sacrifice. I think it'll be worth the patience, the seclusion that comes from Saturn and Pisces, the invested time and energy, and also the willingness to keep the faith. You guys cannot stop believing in that sense. Now, like I said, we'll touch base about this again in the future. We're still a couple of weeks out, so I'll probably do another video where I'm just going to take you guys through the 12 signs as we get closer to this aspect. In the meantime, I hope this gives you guys some food for thought and some insight as to how to navigate this. You know, so we'll touch back on this next time. take note of the speed bumps, the stop signs. Remember, it's not a time for launches. They may lose momentum, and use the next few months to integrate before making any major moves. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, your input, your comments, especially about some of the topics and stuff we spoke about. How are you feeling with Jupiter square Saturn? Are you already feeling the squeeze? And were you born with this aspect? I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate your guys' comments, your thumbs up, and your subscriptions. You guys help support my channel. You help support me as a full-time content creator so I can keep doing what I'm doing. So make sure you share these videos and you stay tuned for the other ones that I'm going to have coming up throughout this next week. Until next time, I will see all of you very soon. Take care.